Welcome, dear friend, to this gentle journey through the wisdom of ancient teachings. Tonight, we will explore timeless stories that have traveled across centuries, carrying with them profound insights about releasing the mind from its constant restlessness and discovering the deep peace that already exists within you. These are not merely tales for entertainment, but transmissions of understanding, echoes from awakened minds who discovered something essential about the nature of true contentment. Feel free to share where you are listening from and what time it is in your world. I am about to offer you a collection of carefully chosen stories, each one holding a key to unlocking the prison of overthinking, anxiety, and the endless seeking that keeps us from recognizing what we already possess. Lao Tzu, the ancient sage, taught us, at the center of your being, you have the answer. You know who you are, and you know what you want. Tonight, we will journey together toward that center, that place of knowing that exists beneath all the noise and confusion of daily life. These stories come from the Zen tradition, but their wisdom transcends any single path or teaching. They speak to universal truths about human consciousness, about the patterns that create suffering, and about the simple shifts in perception that can transform everything. Each tale is both a mirror and a doorway, reflecting back to you what you may not have noticed about your own experience, while opening pathways to greater freedom and understanding. As these narratives unfold in the coming hours, you may find something shifting inside you naturally. The accumulated tension of the day is beginning to dissolve. The weight of worry and planning is starting to lift from your shoulders. You will be guided gently toward a state of deep awareness and natural rest, not through force or effort, but through the simple act of listening with an open heart. So allow yourself to settle now, wherever you are. Take a slow, deep breath, feeling the air fill your lungs completely. And as you release that breath, let it carry away any urgency from the day, any need to be anywhere other than here in this moment. Let your body find its natural weight, supported by whatever surface holds you. Take another breath, this one even slower and deeper. Notice how your body knows exactly how to breathe without any guidance from your thinking mind. This automatic wisdom that keeps you alive is the same intelligence that will guide you through tonight's journey. You can trust it completely. And now, one more breath, releasing with it any expectation about what should happen or how you should feel. Tonight is not about achieving any particular state of mind, but simply about opening to receive whatever wants to emerge naturally through these ancient teachings. The stories you are about to hear have been carefully selected for their power to dissolve the barriers between your surface concerns and your deeper knowing. They work not by giving you new information to think about, but by creating spaces of recognition where truth can reveal itself spontaneously. Each story we will explore tonight operates on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface, they are simple narratives about monks and masters, students and teachers, encountering various challenges and revelations. But beneath this surface layer, they are precise psychological tools, designed to bypass the analytical mind and speak directly to the intuitive wisdom that already knows what you need to hear. You may notice as we progress that certain stories resonate more deeply than others. This is not accidental. Your consciousness naturally attunes to the teachings that are most relevant for your current journey. Trust this process completely. There is no wrong way to receive these transmissions, no correct interpretation you must achieve, no spiritual goal you must accomplish. Sometimes, the greatest insights come not during the stories themselves, but in the quiet spaces between them, when the mind has been softened by narrative and truth can slip through the gaps in our usual defenses. Pay attention to these moments of silence, these pauses where something new might emerge. The tradition from which these stories arise understands something profound about the nature of healing and transformation. Change happens not through force or willpower, but through a gentle dissolving of the barriers we have constructed between ourselves and our natural state of well-being. Tonight, we are creating the perfect conditions for this dissolving to occur naturally and effortlessly. As you listen, you may find your breathing naturally deepening, your muscles releasing tension they have held for hours or even days, your mind beginning to unhook itself from the concerns that seemed so urgent just moments ago. This is not something you need to make happen. It is something you can simply allow to unfold, like a flower opening to sunlight. Let us begin this exploration with a story about the futility of grasping and the freedom that comes through letting go of even our most cherished spiritual seeking. This is a tale that will help you understand why the very effort to find peace might be the one thing standing between you and the peace you seek. In the mountains of ancient China, where mist clung to pine forests and streams carved silver paths through stone, there stood a monastery known for the depth of its contemplative practice. Among the monks who lived there was a young man named Kōan, whose dedication to spiritual seeking had become both his greatest strength and his most persistent obstacle. Kōan had arrived at the monastery 5 years earlier, filled with sincere longing for enlightenment. He had read extensively about the great masters of the past, studied their teachings with scholarly precision, and thrown himself into meditation practice with an intensity that both impressed and concerned his teachers. Every dawn found him in the meditation hall before anyone else. Every evening, he remained long after the others had retired, sitting in perfect posture, wrestling with his mind, seeking the breakthrough that always seemed just beyond his grasp. His days were structured around a relentless pursuit of spiritual attainment. He counted his breaths with mathematical precision, analyzed his thoughts with scientific rigor, and approached each meditation session like a battle to be won. The harder he tried to quiet his mind, the more agitated it became. The more desperately he grasped for peace, the more elusive it seemed to grow. Other monks in the monastery had experienced moments of deep insight, sudden openings, where the nature of reality revealed itself in unmistakable clarity. Kōan had heard their descriptions of these experiences and longed for his own breakthrough with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He increased his sitting time, adopted more austere practices, and scrutinized every mental state for signs of approaching enlightenment. One autumn evening, as the last light faded from the mountain peaks and the air carried the crisp promise of winter, Kōan was assigned a simple task. The monastery's water supply came from a well in the central courtyard, and it was his turn to carry the evening water to the kitchen for tea and washing. He approached this mundane duty with the same intense focus he brought to everything, treating it as another opportunity for mindful practice. The water container was an old wooden bucket, beautifully crafted but showing its age. Bamboo strips had been carefully bound together with natural fibers, creating a vessel that had served the monastery community faithfully for many years. Kōan filled it completely at the well, watching the clear mountain water rise to the brim, and began his careful journey back toward the main buildings. As he walked slowly through the courtyard, his attention was caught by something extraordinary. The full moon had risen above the mountain ridges, perfectly clear in the cloudless sky, and its reflection appeared in the still water surface of his bucket, with such clarity that for a moment he paused in wonder. The reflected moon seemed to float in the dark water like a living thing, complete and luminous, dancing gently with each step he took. Kōan found himself mesmerized by this simple beauty. Here was the moon, simultaneously in the vast sky above and intimately present in the small circle of water he carried. The reflection was so perfect, so immediate, that he felt he could almost reach down and touch the lunar surface itself. As he continued walking, watching the moon's image shimmer and dance, something in his mind began to shift. But the old bucket had reached the limits of its useful life. Years of faithful service had loosened the bamboo bindings, and the wooden strips had begun to separate. Just as Kōsan approached the monastery steps, absorbed in contemplating the moon's reflection, the inevitable happened. Without warning, the bottom of the bucket gave way completely. The water rushed out in an instant, splashing across the stone courtyard and disappearing into the spaces between the paving stones. The moon's reflection, which had seemed so real and substantial just moments before, vanished as completely as if it had never existed. The bucket fell apart in his hands, bamboo strips scattering on the ground, leaving him holding only the rope handle that had once held everything together. In that moment of unexpected emptiness, watching the water flow away and seeing the moon's reflection disappear into nothingness, something profound shifted in Kōsan's understanding. The very thing he had been grasping for so desperately, the enlightenment he had been trying to capture through years of intense effort, suddenly revealed itself in the complete letting go. He stood there in the moonlit courtyard, surrounded by scattered bamboo and puddles of water, and began to laugh. The sound echoed off the monastery walls, a sound of pure recognition and relief. All his striving, all his analysis, all his careful techniques for grasping enlightenment had been like trying to hold the moon's reflection in water, beautiful, compelling, but ultimately impossible to possess. That night, Kōsan composed a simple poem to capture his realization. For years, I tried to hold the moon, carrying it carefully in my bucket of practice. But when the container fell apart and all my efforts scattered like water on stone, there was the moon itself, shining in the sky where it had always been, closer than my own breath. As the Buddha once observed, you only lose what you cling to. This ancient wisdom illuminates the profound paradox at the heart of all spiritual seeking. The very effort to grasp awakening often becomes the primary obstacle to recognizing what is already present. Why do we struggle so intensely with the act of letting go, even when our grasping clearly creates suffering? The mind that seeks enlightenment is the same mind that must be transcended for enlightenment to be recognized. Like Kōsan trying to capture the moon's reflection, we often mistake the image of awakening for awakening itself. Consider your own relationship with seeking and striving. How often do you find yourself trying to force particular experiences in meditation, demanding that your mind behave in certain ways, or measuring your spiritual progress against some imagined ideal? This very effort, no matter how sincere, can become a subtle form of violence against your own nature. The bucket in Kōsan's story represents all our spiritual techniques, practices, and concepts. These tools can be beautiful and useful, but when we become attached to them, when we mistake the container for what it contains, we create unnecessary suffering. The moon was never actually in the bucket. It was always in the sky, just as the peace we seek is always present in awareness itself. Zen master Huangpo taught, "The foolish reject what they see, not what they think. The wise reject what they think, not what they see." Kōsan's breakthrough came not through acquiring new spiritual knowledge, but through the collapse of his entire framework for understanding spirituality. This doesn't mean that meditation practice is useless or that spiritual effort has no value. Rather, it points to the importance of holding our practices lightly, using them as supports for natural awakening, rather than trying to manufacture enlightenment through technique. When we approach practice with the desperation of someone trying to capture moonbeams, we create the very tension that prevents recognition of what is already here. The Buddha said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." The peace that Kōsan discovered was not created by his years of intense practice. It was revealed when his efforts collapsed and there was nothing left to do but recognize what had been present all along. Tonight, as you rest in this moment of listening, can you sense the awareness that knows these words? This knowing presence requires no effort to maintain, no technique to access, no bucket to contain it. It is more intimate than your breath, more immediate than your heartbeat, closer to you than your own thoughts. What would it be like to stop trying to capture this awareness and simply rest as it? What if the very effort to attain peace is the only thing standing between you and the peace that you already are? As Lao Tzu taught, in pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. In pursuit of wisdom, every day something is dropped. Perhaps tonight, something can be dropped. Some effort can be released. Some container for holding the infinite can finally be allowed to fall apart. When Kosan's bucket broke and the reflected moon disappeared, he discovered that the real moon had been shining all along. The light you seek is already illuminating these very words. The awareness you hope to attain is already aware of your hoping. The peace you long for is already the space in which longing arises and passes away. In the bustling trading quarter of ancient Kyoto, where silk merchants and tea dealers conducted business beneath colorful banners, there lived a wealthy man whose prosperity was known throughout the city. Master Hayashi owned 3 successful shops, employed dozens of workers, and lived in a magnificent house with gardens that were the envy of his neighbors. His reputation for shrewd business practices was matched only by his concern for maintaining his social standing among the other prominent families of the district. One morning, as autumn rain created silver streams along the cobblestone streets, a figure approached the ornate gate of Master Hayashi's residence. The visitor was a Zen master named Ryogen, traveling from a remote mountain monastery, but his appearance suggested nothing more than a common beggar. His simple brown robes were patched and worn thin from years of mountain weather. His straw sandals were muddy from walking the wet roads, and his wooden begging bowl showed the stains and scratches of countless meals received through the kindness of strangers. Master Ryogen stood quietly at the gate, rain dripping from his shaved head, waiting with the patient dignity that comes from years of spiritual practice. When the gatekeeper finally noticed him, the servant's expression immediately showed disdain and irritation. "What do you want, beggar?" the gatekeeper demanded harshly, not bothering to bow or show any respect. "This is the house of Master Hayashi, a man of great importance. We have no scraps for wandering vagrants." "I am traveling and seeking alms," Master Ryogen replied gently, his voice carrying the calm authority of deep spiritual training. "Perhaps your master would offer a simple meal to a monk who has walked far in service of the Dharma." The gatekeeper looked him up and down with obvious contempt. These ragged clothes, this humble appearance, clearly this was just another vagrant trying to take advantage of his master's household. "Be gone," he commanded roughly. "My master does not waste food on beggars. Find your charity elsewhere, old man." Master Ryogen accepted this rejection without anger or argument. He simply bowed with quiet dignity, turned, and walked back into the rain, his empty bowl tucked beneath his arm. The gatekeeper watched him disappear into the grey morning, satisfied that he had protected his master from an unwanted distraction. Several hours later, as the afternoon sun broke through the clouds and painted the wet streets in golden light, the same figure returned to the same gate. But now, everything had changed completely. Master Ryogen wore his formal ceremonial robes, rich golden silk embroidered with intricate dragon patterns, a magnificent purple sash across his shoulders, and prayer beads carved from precious sandalwood. His bearing remained humble and peaceful, but his appearance now spoke unmistakably of high spiritual rank and monastery wealth. This time, when the gatekeeper saw him approaching, his entire demeanor transformed as if struck by lightning. "Welcome, honored master," he exclaimed, bowing so deeply his forehead nearly touched the ground. "Please, please enter immediately. My master will be so honored to receive such a distinguished visitor. What a blessing for our humble household." Master Hayashi himself hurried out to greet the impressive visitor, offering elaborate bows and flowery words of welcome. "Venerable sir, what an extraordinary honor for our unworthy home. You must join us for our finest meal. Please allow us the privilege of serving you with everything we have." They ushered Master Ryogen into their most elegant dining room, where servants quickly prepared a sumptuous feast. Delicate fish prepared with artistic precision, perfectly seasoned vegetables arranged like small sculptures, fragrant rice, and sweet desserts that spoke of considerable expense filled the low table. Master Hayashi sat opposite the honored guest, beaming with pride at his ability to host such an important religious figure. As the first course was presented with great ceremony, Master Ryogen did something completely unexpected. Instead of eating, he carefully removed his beautiful ceremonial robe and folded it with deliberate attention. Then, with movements both graceful and purposeful, he placed the folded silk garment directly in front of the elaborate feast, positioning it as if it were the guest of honor. Standing up with quiet dignity, Master Ryogen spoke clearly, so all present could hear his words. "This meal is not for me," he announced with gentle authority. "It is for the robe. The robe is what you have invited to your table. The robe is what has earned your respect and hospitality." Without another word, he walked calmly out of the house, leaving behind both the magnificent feast and the rich man's stunned realization of his own superficial judgment. The beautiful ceremonial robe remained folded before the untouched meal, a silent teacher more eloquent than any sermon. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us, do not judge by appearances. A rich heart may be under a poor coat. Here we discover how our fixation on external symbols creates barriers to genuine recognition of worth and wisdom. Why do we judge others so quickly based on their clothing, possessions, or outward presentation? Our conditioned minds have learned to create rapid categories and hierarchies based on surface appearances. This mental shortcut allows us to feel we understand people without the more challenging work of seeing their true nature or character. Master Hayashi's household represents a pattern we all recognize in ourselves. How differently do we treat the well-dressed stranger versus the poorly dressed one? How does our attention change when someone mentions their impressive job title versus their humble occupation? How does our respect shift when we learn about someone's wealth or education versus their lack of formal credentials? This ancient wisdom illuminates our tendency to project worth onto external symbols rather than recognizing the inherent dignity present in every person. Master Ryogen remained exactly the same human being in both encounters. His wisdom, compassion, and spiritual realization were unchanged by his clothing, yet the household's treatment of him transformed completely based solely on appearances. Look deeply at your own patterns of judgment and assumption. Perhaps you find yourself making quick evaluations about people based on their cars, their neighborhoods, their accents, or their appearance. Each of these judgments reveals how we have been conditioned to equate external presentation with internal worth. The story points us toward a fundamental question about authenticity and recognition. If we receive dramatically different treatment based on our presentation, which version of the response reflects how people truly see us? Are we relating to actual human beings or to costumes and social signals? In spiritual practice, we cultivate what might be called original seeing, the capacity to recognize the essential dignity that exists beneath all roles, costumes, and presentations. This original worth doesn't change whether we are wearing our finest clothes or our most casual attire, whether others treat us with respect or dismissal. Master Ryogen's teaching was not just for the merchant's family, but for all of us who might witness his demonstration. By serving the robe instead of himself, he revealed how often we relate to people's personas. We honor the title, the clothing, the symbols of status, while missing the actual human being present before us. Consider how this insight might transform your daily interactions. The server at your restaurant, the clerk at the store, the person asking for directions each carries the same essential dignity as the most honored guest. The challenge is seeing past the uniforms, the circumstances, the social roles, to the fundamental humanity beneath. This doesn't mean we ignore practical realities or social conventions, but that we hold them more lightly. We can acknowledge someone's professional role while remembering their deeper nature. We can dress appropriately for occasions while knowing our worth doesn't depend on our wardrobe. Zen Master Dogen taught, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. This forgetting includes releasing our attachment to how others perceive our external presentation, allowing us to meet people from a place of genuine presence rather than performance. Tonight, as you consider the various roles and presentations you inhabit throughout your day, can you sense the unchanging awareness that witnesses all these temporary costumes? Can you feel the essential self that remains constant, whether others see you as important or invisible, successful or struggling? 5. The Buddha said, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." Master Ryogen's silent gesture spoke more powerfully than lengthy lectures about equality and compassion. By walking away from the feast prepared for his appearance rather than his essence, he offered a teaching that continues to illuminate hearts across centuries. When we learn to see beyond appearances, we discover that the beggar at our gate might be carrying wisdom more valuable than gold, and the person in expensive clothes might be spiritually impoverished. True wealth lies not in what adorns the body, but in what illuminates the heart. In a monastery nestled among bamboo groves, where morning mist drifted like prayers through the green stalks, there lived a young student named Daiki, whose sincere dedication was matched only by his growing sense of invisibility. For 18 months, he had thrown himself wholeheartedly into every aspect of monastic life, rising before dawn for meditation, working diligently in the gardens, studying the ancient texts with careful attention, and maintaining perfect attendance at all Dharma talks. Yet despite his earnest efforts and genuine devotion to the path, Daiki felt increasingly overlooked by his teacher, Master Sogen. During group discussions, the master's attention seemed to flow naturally to other students. When Daiki asked questions, the responses came briefly, and without the detailed guidance he witnessed others receiving. There were no private interviews offered, no special instructions given, no acknowledgement of the countless hours he spent in devoted practice. Other students, some who had arrived after Daiki, appeared to receive more recognition, more personal attention, more of the master's precious time and energy. During walking meditation, Master Sogen would sometimes stop to offer quiet guidance to certain disciples. During work periods, he might join particular students for extended conversations about the Dharma. At mealtimes, he occasionally shared tables with selected individuals, engaging in what appeared to be profound exchanges of wisdom. As seasons changed and this pattern continued, Daiki's initial enthusiasm began to transform into confusion and self-doubt. He watched other practitioners receive what seemed like signs of progress and approval, while feeling himself becoming increasingly invisible. His mind began creating elaborate stories about his inadequacy. Perhaps he lacked the intellectual capacity for deep understanding. Perhaps his previous training had been insufficient. Perhaps he simply didn't possess whatever essential spiritual quality distinguished the chosen students from the overlooked ones. The more he observed and compared, the more worthless he felt. Each day brought fresh evidence of his apparent insignificance. He began to question not only his spiritual aptitude, but his very worth as a human being. The joy that had initially drawn him to practice was gradually replaced by a heavy sense of failure and disappointment. One morning, as cherry blossoms drifted across the monastery grounds like snow, and the air carried the subtle fragrance of spring awakening, Daiki reached his breaking point. Unable to bear the feeling of meaninglessness any longer, he approached Master Sogen in the meditation garden, where the old teacher sat quietly among the flowering trees. "Master," Daiki began, his voice trembling with accumulated frustration and wounded pride, "I have been here for over a year, practicing with complete dedication and sincerity. I have tried to be a worthy student, to follow the way faithfully and with an open heart. Yet you have given me no personal guidance, no special attention, no recognition of my efforts or progress." He paused, gathering courage for what felt like a confession of failure. "I feel like nothing more than a worthless stone lying forgotten in this monastery courtyard. Since I am clearly of no value here, since my presence contributes nothing meaningful, I have decided to leave and seek teaching elsewhere. Perhaps another master will find something worthwhile in what I have to offer." Master Sogen looked up slowly from his quiet contemplation, his ancient eyes reflecting something that might have been gentle amusement mixed with profound compassion. He gazed at Daiki for a long moment, then gestured around the garden where they sat. Carefully arranged stones of various sizes created pathways through the flowering trees, supported small bridges over streams, and formed the foundation for decorative walls and elevated planting areas. "You say you are a worthless stone," Master Sogen replied, with the calm patience of someone who had spent decades guiding confused students toward clarity. "Tell me, do you see these other stones here in the garden?" 0, 5. "Yes, Master," Daiki answered, wondering where this seemingly obvious observation was leading. "Do you walk on them when you wish to cross the stream?" the master asked with the tone of someone exploring something genuinely curious. "Yes, Master," Daiki replied, still confused about the relevance of these questions. "Do you rearrange them when they displease you? Do you criticize them when they don't meet your expectations? Do you demand that they change their shape or position to better suit your preferences?" Master Sogen continued with the same gentle inquiry. "No, Master, of course not," Daiki said, beginning to sense that something profound was being revealed, though he couldn't yet grasp its meaning. Master Sogen smiled with the warmth that comes from watching understanding dawn in a student's consciousness. "Look more carefully at these stones, my young friend. This entire monastery exists because of them. They ask for nothing, no praise, no recognition, no special attention. They make no demands for acknowledgement of their service, yet they support everything." He gestured toward the buildings around them. "The meditation hall stands firmly because of stones like these. The kitchen functions because stones create its foundation. The pathways that allow us to move through our daily practice exist because of their steady presence. Without these humble stones, this entire sacred space would crumble into chaos." The master paused, allowing his words to settle into Daiki's awareness like seeds finding fertile ground. "You say you are a stone. If you truly understood what it means to be a stone, to support without seeking credit, to serve without demanding recognition, to exist with such fundamental stability that others can build their practice upon your presence, you would already be enlightened." In that moment, something cracked open in Daiki's understanding, like an egg revealing new life. He saw suddenly how his constant seeking for attention, his need for validation, his desire to be seen as special, had been the very obstacles preventing him from recognizing what he already was and what he had always been contributing. Like the stones beneath his feet, he had been supporting the monastery community all along through his sincere practice, his quiet presence, his simple dedication to the path. His worth had never depended on being noticed or praised. His value lay in his fundamental capacity to provide the stable foundation upon which others could build their own spiritual development. The Buddha's wisdom tells us, thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. The deeper teaching here reveals that our true value lies not in being noticed, but in our fundamental capacity to support what matters. Why do we struggle so intensely with the need for recognition and external validation? From early childhood, we learn to measure our worth through grades, awards, praise, and comparative success. This conditioning becomes so deeply embedded that we often transfer it unconsciously to spiritual practice, seeking enlightenment as another form of achievement, rather than recognizing it as our natural state. Consider your own experience with seeking acknowledgement and feeling overlooked. How often do you find yourself wanting appreciation at work, hoping your efforts are noticed by family members, or seeking confirmation that your contributions matter? Notice the subtle tension that arises when others receive praise that you feel you deserve, or when your dedicated work goes unrecognized while someone else gets credit. This seeking mind creates endless suffering because it places our peace and self-worth at the mercy of other people's attention and approval. Like Daiki in the story, we can spend tremendous energy trying to be seen as special while missing the profound value of what we already offer simply by being present and sincere. The stone mind that Master Sogen pointed toward represents what Buddhism calls beginner's mind, the willingness to be ordinary, to serve without fanfare, or to exist with such fundamental stability that others can rely on our presence. This doesn't mean diminishing ourselves or hiding our gifts, but offering them freely without attachment to how they're received. In practical terms, cultivating stone mind means practicing what Zen calls just being in daily life. When we work, we simply work fully without seeking applause. When we listen to friends, we listen completely without needing to be seen as good listeners. When we practice meditation, we just meditate without grasping for special experiences or insights. This approach doesn't make us passive or prevent us from sharing our talents authentically. Rather, it frees us from the exhausting cycle of performance and validation seeking. When we stop trying so hard to be noticed, we discover a natural dignity that doesn't depend on external recognition. Tonight, as you consider the various ways you might be seeking recognition or feeling overlooked, can you sense the relief that comes with releasing the need to be special? Can you feel the natural worth that emerges when you stop performing for approval and instead offer your presence like stones supporting a temple? As Master Dogen taught, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. This forgetting includes releasing our attachment to being seen as important or accomplished, allowing us to discover the quiet strength that comes from simply being authentic and dependable. The most profound teachings often come not from those who seek the spotlight, but from those who, like stones, support the whole with unshakable presence and humble strength. Your worth is not determined by who notices you, but by the steady foundation you provide for life to flourish around you. In the depths of a great crystal river, where water flowed clear as mountain air and currents moved with the ancient wisdom of countless springs, there lived an entire community of small, aquatic creatures. The river's flow passed above them like a gentle breath, carrying nutrients from distant peaks and the promise of vast oceans beyond. For countless generations, these beings had made their home along the sandy bottom, each one learning from birth the fundamental rule of survival. Hold on tightly to whatever you can grasp. Young and old, strong and weak, all the creatures lived by the same unquestioned principle. Every individual learned to wrap their appendages around river rocks, fallen branches, and sturdy roots. The current flowing overhead was viewed with suspicion and fear, spoken of in hushed tones as a dangerous force that would sweep away anyone foolish enough to trust it. Hold on. The elders would instruct each new generation with the authority of inherited wisdom. The current is treacherous and unpredictable. It will carry you away to unknown places where you cannot survive. Safety lies in staying exactly where you are, gripping tightly to what you know. Only by clinging to the familiar can you hope to live a long and secure life. But one small creature, whom we shall call Kawa, grew increasingly weary of this endless grasping. Day after day, she watched the current flow overhead with graceful purpose, observing how it moved with such natural ease and apparent direction. While her neighbors spent their energy complaining about the constant effort required to maintain their grip, she found herself wondering what it might feel like to trust that flowing water. The older creatures spoke fearfully of the current's power, describing it as a violent force that would dash anyone against the rocks and destroy them utterly. But when Kawa observed it carefully, she saw something different. The flow appeared gentle, yet purposeful, carrying leaves and small debris, not with destructive violence, but with a kind of intelligent navigation around obstacles. "I am tired of clinging," Kawa announced one morning, her voice carrying across the sandy bottom to her astonished neighbors. "Though I cannot see where it leads, I trust that the current knows its destination better than I know my fears. I shall let go and allow it to carry me where it will, for I sense that if I continue grasping, I shall die of spiritual starvation before I ever truly live." The other creatures gasped in horror at this declaration. They gathered around her with urgent warnings and desperate pleas for her to reconsider this obviously suicidal decision. "Fool," they cried in unison. "Release your grip, and that current will tumble you mercilessly across the rocky bottom. You will be battered and broken, dying far more quickly than any boredom or dissatisfaction could kill you. Think of your safety. Consider your security. Why would you abandon the proven wisdom of generations for such a reckless gamble?" But Kawa had made her decision with the quiet certainty that comes from deep inner knowing. She had observed the current long enough to sense something trustworthy in its movement, something that called to a part of her that had been waiting to respond. Taking one last look at her neighbors clinging desperately to their familiar anchors, she released her grip on the smooth stone that had been her security for so long. Immediately, the current seized her, and just as the others had predicted, she was tumbled and tossed across the rocky bottom. Her small body struck stone after stone, each impact bringing pain she had never experienced while safely clinging to her anchor. The physical discomfort was real and immediate, and for a moment, she wondered if her neighbors had been right about the dangers of trusting the unknown. Yet something remarkable began to happen as Kawa continued to surrender to the current's power, refusing to grab for new anchors despite her initial discomfort. As she released more completely into the flow, refusing to fight its direction or resist its movement, the water gradually lifted her higher from the dangerous bottom. The tumbling ceased as she learned to move with the current rather than against it. The rocks could no longer reach her as she flowed in harmony with the water's natural path. Now she moved with the current itself, no longer fighting its direction, but becoming one with its graceful movement. She discovered that the flow had its own intelligence, its own way of navigating around obstacles and finding the clearest path forward. What had appeared dangerous from the bottom was revealed as supremely skillful when experienced from within. As Kawa traveled downstream, creatures in distant parts of the river witnessed something they had never seen before. Here was one of their own kind, yet she appeared to be flying through the water, moving with the elegant power of the current itself, rather than struggling against it. "See, a miracle," they called out to each other in amazement. "A creature like ourselves, yet she soars through the water like a being transformed. Surely she must be the prophesied one." come to save us all from our endless struggling. Kawa heard their cries and felt deep compassion for their misunderstanding. She had not become something other than what she was, but had simply discovered what she had always been capable of becoming. "I am no more special than any of you," she called back as the current carried her past their amazed faces. "The river delights in lifting us all free, if only we dare to trust its wisdom. Our true work is not clinging to the bottom in fear, but embracing this grand adventure of flow and trust." But the creatures only called out louder, "Savior, miracle worker." Even as they spoke these words of reverence, they tightened their grips on rocks and roots, watching until she disappeared around a bend. Then they began weaving legends about the miraculous being who had briefly graced their community, never understanding that the same current that carried her was available to them as well. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us, you only lose what you cling to. This ancient teaching illuminates the profound paradox of human experience. We spend our lives grasping for security and control, believing our safety depends on holding tight to familiar circumstances. Yet in this very clinging, we create the suffering we seek to avoid. Why do we cling so desperately when the current of life offers to carry us toward unknown adventures? From early childhood, we learn that the known feels safe and the unknown appears dangerous. This conditioning becomes a spiritual obstacle when it prevents growth beyond familiar limitations and keeps us trapped in situations that no longer serve our highest development. We also suffer from the illusion of control, believing that by grasping circumstances, relationships, and identities, we can somehow stop the natural flow of change. This creates enormous tension because it puts us in opposition to reality itself, which is constant movement and transformation. Consider the areas of your own life where you find yourself clinging tightly. Perhaps it's a relationship that has outgrown its original form, a career that no longer brings fulfillment, or an image of yourself that now constrains rather than supports your growth. The current of change will flow, whether we resist it or not. Our choice is whether to exhaust ourselves in futile opposition or discover the grace available in conscious surrender. This doesn't mean becoming passive or abandoning all effort. Rather, it means learning to distinguish between skillful action and anxious control, between appropriate planning and desperate grasping. Like water flowing around rocks, we can learn to move with life's natural currents while still maintaining our essential direction and purpose. The Buddha taught, nothing is permanent except change. When we truly accept this fundamental truth about existence, we can begin to flow with change rather than constantly fighting against it. This flowing doesn't diminish our effectiveness. Water doesn't struggle against the mountainside, yet carves the deepest canyons through patient persistence. In practical terms, trusting the current means developing what Zen calls going with the grain of the universe, sensing the natural direction of events and aligning our actions with the deeper intelligence that moves through all life. This requires cultivating sensitivity to timing, rhythm, and the subtle signals that indicate when to act and when to wait. Tonight, as you rest in this moment's stillness, what might you be ready to release your grip upon? Perhaps it's a worry about tomorrow's challenges, a resentment from yesterday's disappointments, or a way of controlling your experience that has grown exhausting. Can you feel into the current of this moment's aliveness and sense its trustworthy direction? As Lao Tzu taught, water is fluid, soft, and yielding, but water will wear away rock, which cannot yield and is unyielding. The strength we seek comes not from rigid resistance to life's flow, but from the flexible responsiveness that allows us to move in harmony with forces far greater than our individual will. When Kawa released her grip on the familiar stone, she discovered that the current she had feared would destroy her was actually the very force that could carry her home to her truest nature. The flow you resist may be the exact movement that wants to transport you toward the freedom you've been seeking. Master Enju lived in a small temple at the edge of a mountain village, where his reputation for wisdom and compassion had spread throughout the surrounding valleys. For decades, he had maintained a practice of profound simplicity, rising each morning to sit in meditation, tending his small garden with careful attention, and offering guidance to the steady stream of visitors who sought his teaching. His days followed a natural rhythm that seemed to flow effortlessly between periods of solitude and service. On this particular afternoon, as golden sunlight slanted through the temple windows and the air carried the peaceful sounds of village life, Master Enju was approached by a traveler whose excitement was barely contained. The visitor had journeyed from a distant province specifically to meet this renowned teacher, having heard extraordinary stories about the spiritual accomplishments of various masters in the region. "Venerable Master Enju," the visitor began, bowing deeply but with an energy that suggested he was eager to witness something spectacular. "I have traveled far to seek your wisdom, but I must tell you about the incredible master I studied with in the eastern mountains. His spiritual powers were beyond anything I had imagined possible." The visitor's eyes gleamed with remembered wonder as he continued his account. "Just last month, I witnessed him perform the most amazing miracle. During a festival celebration, he took his brush and wrote sacred characters through the air, across the entire width of a broad river. The holy words appeared blazing in the sky for all to see, shining like fire against the clouds. The entire village was filled with awe and devotion at this demonstration of supernatural attainment." He paused, looking expectantly at Master Enju, clearly anticipating either a matching display of miraculous abilities or at least detailed descriptions of equally impressive spiritual powers. "Master, can you perform such extraordinary feats? Do you possess abilities like this to demonstrate the depth of your realization? What miracles can you show me that prove your spiritual accomplishment?" Master Enju continued arranging flowers in a simple vase, his movements unhurried and natural. He listened to the visitor's enthusiastic account with genuine interest, neither dismissive of what had been witnessed nor competitive about his own capabilities. When the traveler finished speaking, the master remained quiet for several moments, his attention fully present to the task at hand. "Perhaps your teacher can indeed perform such wonders," Master Enju replied with matter-of-fact calmness. "I do not doubt what you have seen, and I have no criticism of such demonstrations. Different teachers serve in different ways, and spectacular displays may inspire faith in some students who need such encouragement." The visitor looked somewhat disappointed, having expected either miraculous demonstrations or at least impressive claims about supernatural abilities. He pressed further, clearly hoping for something more dramatic than this humble response. "But Master, if you cannot perform such wonders, what then distinguishes your teaching? What miracle do you offer? How can students know that you have achieved genuine spiritual realization if you cannot demonstrate powers beyond ordinary human capability?" Master Enju's eyes reflected the kind of gentle humor that often accompanies profound truth. He looked directly at his questioner with complete sincerity and spoke with the simplicity of someone who had discovered something both ordinary and extraordinary. "My miracle is this," he said quietly. "When I feel hungry, I eat. When I feel thirsty, I drink. When I am tired, I rest. When spring comes, I notice the flowers blooming. When winter arrives, I observe the snow falling. When students come seeking wisdom, I offer what understanding has been given to me. When I am alone, I enjoy the silence." 5. He gestured around the simple temple room where they sat. "This is my miracle, to be completely present for the reality of each moment as it unfolds, to respond naturally to what life presents without resistance or manipulation. to find the sacred not in supernatural displays, but in the perfect ordinariness of existence itself. The hall fell into deep silence as the implications of this teaching settled into the space between them. The visitor had come expecting demonstrations of transcendent power, but instead found himself confronted with something far more challenging: the invitation to recognize the miraculous nature of his own immediate experience. The Buddha taught, if you truly loved yourself, you would never harm yourself with negative thoughts. The heart of Master Enju's teaching lies in recognizing that the miracle we seek is not hidden in extraordinary demonstrations, but reveals itself in the complete embrace of ordinary experience. Why do we overlook the miraculous nature of our everyday existence? Our minds have been conditioned to dismiss as mundane precisely those experiences that are most constantly available: breathing, seeing, tasting, the simple fact of awareness itself. We become like fish who have forgotten the water they swim in, taking for granted the very foundations of conscious experience. Consider your own relationship with the extraordinary and the ordinary. How often do you find yourself seeking peak experiences, special states of consciousness, or dramatic breakthroughs, while missing the profound mystery of basic existence? The ability to see these words, to understand their meaning, to feel your body breathing, each of these represents a miracle that no science can fully explain. Master Enju's miracle of eating when hungry points to what Zen calls natural functioning, the spontaneous responsiveness of awakened consciousness to the needs of each moment. This doesn't mean being reactive or impulsive, but rather developing such intimate attunement to present reality that appropriate action arises naturally without the interference of excessive thinking or spiritual ambition. This teaching doesn't diminish the value of dedicated practice or sincere study of wisdom traditions. Rather, it points to the ultimate goal of all such practices, not to achieve supernatural powers or accumulate spiritual experiences, but to become so naturally responsive to reality that our actions flow effortlessly from clear seeing rather than from ego-driven seeking. In practical terms, cultivating appreciation for ordinary miracles begins with what Zen calls beginner's mind, approaching familiar experiences with fresh attention, as if encountering them for the first time. Try eating a meal with complete presence, noticing not just flavors, but the incredible coordination of sensory experience that makes taste possible. Pay attention to a conversation with a friend, marveling at the mysterious process by which thoughts in one mind somehow communicate themselves to another consciousness. Observe the daily miracle of sleep, how awareness dissolves each night and reconstitutes itself each morning, complete with the capacity to dream entire worlds that seem utterly real while we experience them. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, can you recognize the miracle in this simple transition from waking to sleeping? Can you feel the extraordinary nature of your breath naturally deepening, your body settling into stillness, your mind beginning to release the day's activities and concerns? 5. The Buddha said, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." True miracles are not violations of natural law, but recognitions of the natural law of consciousness itself, the mysterious fact that the universe has somehow awakened to itself through your eyes, experiences itself through your senses, and knows itself through your awareness. When Master Enju eats because he's hungry, he participates in the cosmic miracle of life sustaining itself. When he rests because he's tired, he aligns with the universal rhythm of activity and stillness. When he notices spring flowers blooming, he witnesses the endless creativity of existence, expressing itself in countless forms. This miracle is not something you must achieve or develop, it is what you already are. The awareness reading these words requires no special training to access, no supernatural powers to maintain. It is more intimate than breath, more immediate than heartbeat, closer to you than your own thoughts. The miracle you seek is the very consciousness that is seeking. In the ancient capital of Nara, where cherry blossoms lined the imperial gardens and traditional temples stood alongside the grand administrative buildings of government, there lived a man who held one of the highest positions in the provincial hierarchy. Governor Watanabe was responsible for the welfare of hundreds of thousands of citizens, the implementation of imperial edicts, and the delicate balance of maintaining peace throughout his vast territory. His days were consumed by formal ceremonies, weighty decisions, and endless meetings with other officials who addressed him with elaborate titles and ceremonial bows. The weight of his position brought both tremendous privilege and crushing responsibility. Every morning, servants dressed him in the finest silk robes befitting his rank. Every interaction was filtered through layers of protocol and political consideration. Every word he spoke was carefully measured for its potential impact on his reputation and administrative effectiveness. He was Your Excellency, Honorable Governor, Lord Watanabe, titles that both elevated and isolated him from simple human connection. Despite his worldly success and the respect his position commanded, Governor Watanabe felt a growing emptiness within his heart. The formal interactions, the constant performance of authority, and the distance his rank created between himself and authentic relationships left him longing for something more genuine. He had heard stories of a Zen master named Shido, whose wisdom was said to cut through all pretense and speak directly to the human soul. Tales reached him of this teacher's ability to see past social roles and connect with the essential nature that exists beneath all external identity. After months of contemplation, the governor decided to seek out this renowned master. On a quiet morning when cherry blossoms drifted like snow through the temple grounds, Governor Watanabe made his way to Master Shido's simple hermitage on the mountain slopes above the city. Following proper protocol, he brought his usual retinue of attendants and guards, as his position demanded. His elaborate silk robes rustled with each step, and his official seal gleamed in the morning sunlight, announcing his importance to anyone who might observe his approach. Following established etiquette, the governor's chief attendant approached the hermitage first to announce his master's arrival. The attendant knocked respectfully on the simple wooden door, and when Master Shido appeared, a small elderly man dressed in plain brown robes, the attendant bowed deeply with formal precision. "Honored Master," the attendant declared, with the ceremonial language required for such occasions. "My lord, the most excellent governor of this province, administrator of imperial justice, protector of the people, and guardian of peace, has come to seek your wisdom. He humbly requests an audience with your reverence." Master Shido listened to this elaborate introduction without any change in his calm expression. When the attendant finished his formal announcement, the master looked up with clear eyes and replied without hesitation, in a voice both gentle and firm, "I have no business with such a collection of titles and roles. These labels mean nothing to me. Tell him to leave." The attendant's face flushed with confusion and embarrassment. Never in his years of service had anyone refused to meet with the governor. Important religious figures, wealthy merchants, even imperial representatives, all had received his master with appropriate respect and deference. He returned to where Governor Watanabe waited, his head bowed in shame as he reported the master's unexpected words. But rather than feeling insulted or angry, something profound shifted within the governor's understanding. In that moment of rejection, he recognized something essential. The master had not rejected him personally. He had rejected the elaborate facade of titles and positions that separated human beings from authentic encounter. He had refused to meet with a role rather than a person. Governor Watanabe understood immediately what was required. He turned to his attendants and guards, dismissing them with gentle words and genuine gratitude for their service. He removed his ornate outer robes, leaving only simple undergarments. He washed the formal cosmetics from his face and tied back his hair in the style of a common citizen. Then, alone and unadorned, he approached the hermitage again. This time, he knocked on the door himself. When Master Shido appeared, the man who had been Your Excellency just moments before bowed humbly and spoke in a quiet, personal voice that had not been heard by others in years. "Master," he said simply, using his birth name rather than any official title. "I am Taro. I have come seeking guidance on the path to understanding. I feel lost beneath all the roles I must play, and I long to remember who I am when all the costumes are removed. Would you be willing to speak with me?" Upon hearing this humble introduction, Master Shido's stern expression immediately transformed into a warm, welcoming smile. His eyes reflected genuine delight, and he opened his arms in a gesture of embrace that spoke of recognition between one human being and another. "Ah, Taro," he exclaimed with evident joy. "Please come in immediately. I have been hoping to meet you. Let us sit together and share tea while we speak of the Dharma and the challenges of finding authentic life within the structures of worldly responsibility." The Buddha observed, "However many holy words you read, however many you speak, what good will they do you if you do not act upon them?" This teaching reveals the profound difference between our essential nature and the roles we temporarily inhabit in the world. Why do we become so identified with our social roles and professional titles that we lose touch with our authentic selves? Over time, we can become so merged with our positions that we forget the simple person beneath all the layers of identity. We begin to believe we are our job titles, our relationship roles, our social status, when these are simply temporary costumes we wear. Our culture intensifies this pattern by emphasizing hierarchical recognition and external markers of success. We learn early that certain titles, achievements, and positions command respect and attention. This conditioning can become so strong that we unconsciously believe our worth as human beings depends on maintaining these external symbols of accomplishment. Consider how differently you feel and behave in various contexts throughout your day. Notice the subtle ways you might introduce yourself through credentials rather than essence, interact differently based on perceived status, or find yourself speaking from a role rather than from authentic presence. While some adaptation to context is natural, where might you be hiding behind professional identity in ways that prevent genuine connection? The teaching here isn't that social roles are inherently problematic. Governments need administrators, hospitals need doctors, families need parents. Rather, it's about maintaining awareness of the difference between the temporary functions we serve and our enduring humanity. Master Shido wasn't rejecting governance or suggesting that social organization is worthless. He was pointing to the spiritual danger of becoming so identified with external roles that we lose access to our authentic selves. The practice of essential meeting involves learning to recognize and connect with the fundamental personhood in ourselves and others, regardless of the roles and titles that might be present. This doesn't mean ignoring appropriate social protocols or abandoning professional boundaries, but maintaining awareness of the human being who exists both within and beyond these structures. When Governor Watanabe became simply Taro, he didn't lose his governmental responsibilities or his capacity to serve his province effectively. Instead, he gained access to wisdom and connection that could actually enhance his service by grounding it in genuine humanity rather than mere authority. In Zen practice, we cultivate what might be called original face, the authentic self that exists beneath all costumes and performances. This original nature doesn't change whether we're dressed for important meetings or relaxing at home. whether others treat us with deference or casual equality. Tonight, as you reflect on the various identities and roles you carry throughout your day, can you sense the simple person who exists beneath all the titles and positions? Can you imagine what it might feel like to meet others and be met from this place of essential humanity rather than through the filters of social hierarchy? 5. The Buddha taught, in the end, only 3 things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. The titles and positions we hold are among the things we must ultimately release, but the love and gentleness we bring to our roles, these arise from our authentic nature and remain with us always. True leadership, whether in governance or any other sphere, emerges not from the authority of position, but from the authenticity of presence. When we can move through our various roles while remaining connected to our essential humanity, we serve not only more effectively, but with the kind of wisdom that touches hearts and inspires genuine transformation. In a peaceful monastery nestled among rolling green hills, where morning mist clung to ancient oak trees, a young novice named Ren lived with deep sincerity and an open heart that seemed to absorb the suffering of the entire world. Every morning, he would rise before dawn to meditate, and every evening, he would walk the monastery grounds in quiet contemplation. His dedication to practice was evident to all who knew him, yet something troubled his spirit with increasing intensity. Each day, as Ren read news from the outside world or heard travelers speak of distant hardships, his heart would grow heavier with accumulated pain. Wars raged in foreign lands, bringing death and displacement to countless families. Children went hungry in nearby villages, while those with abundance wasted resources carelessly. Disease spread through communities that lacked basic medical care, and cruelty seemed to flourish wherever human beings gathered in large numbers. The weight of all this suffering pressed down upon Ren like a mountain, making it difficult to breathe during meditation, let alone find the peace that his spiritual practice promised. He felt as though he carried the pain of every being he had ever heard about, and the burden was becoming unbearable. His shoulders curved forward under invisible weight. His sleep became restless with dreams of others' anguish, and his meditation periods were consumed by worry rather than tranquility. One morning, unable to bear the crushing load any longer, Ren approached his teacher, Master Yasuko, who was tending to the small monastery garden. The elderly woman moved slowly among the vegetables, pulling weeds with careful attention, her weathered hands gentle with each plant, despite the arthritis that made her movements deliberate and sometimes painful. "Master," Ren began, his voice heavy with anguish and his face showing the strain of sleepless nights. "I feel the suffering of all beings pressing upon my heart like stones. I see the wars, the hunger, the sickness, and the endless cruelty that humans inflict upon each other and other creatures. This weight is crushing my spirit and making it impossible to find peace." He paused, struggling to find words for the overwhelming sensation of carrying burdens that weren't originally his own. "How can I possibly sit in meditation when others are dying in agony? How can I find inner peace when the world is drowning in such pain? Sometimes I feel guilty for even eating a simple meal when I know others are starving." Master Yasuko looked up from her radishes, her eyes kind but penetrating, with the clarity that comes from decades of spiritual practice. Without speaking immediately, she gestured toward a large, smooth river stone that sat at the edge of the garden path. The stone was beautiful in its simplicity, worn smooth by countless years of water and weather, but it was clearly very heavy and would require considerable effort to move. "Pick it up," the master instructed quietly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had guided many students through similar crises of overwhelming compassion. Though puzzled by this seemingly random request, Ren obeyed without question. He bent down and with considerable effort lifted the stone, immediately feeling its substantial weight. It was even heavier than it appeared, and his muscles strained under the burden. His back began to ache almost immediately, and he wondered what lesson could possibly emerge from this simple but uncomfortable task. "Now," said Master Yasuko, returning to her careful weeding as if nothing unusual was happening, "carry it with you for the rest of the day. Do not put it down for any reason. Take it to meditation, to meals, to your work assignments, to your evening study. Let it be your constant companion, from sunrise to sunset." Ren did as instructed, though he wondered increasingly about the purpose of this strange exercise. He carried the heavy stone everywhere throughout that long day, feeling its weight grow more oppressive with each passing hour. During morning meditation, his arms trembled with the effort of holding it, while trying to maintain proper posture. During meals, he could barely manage to eat with the stone balanced awkwardly in his lap. While sweeping the temple floors, his movements became clumsy and inefficient as he struggled to work around the stone's bulk. By afternoon, his shoulders screamed in pain, and he found himself constantly shifting the weight from one position to another in search of relief that never came. By evening, his entire body ached with exhaustion, and he felt as though he might collapse from the accumulated strain. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Ren stumbled back to his master. His face was pale with fatigue, sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air, and his hands shook from the effort of maintaining his grip on the stone throughout the day. "Master," he gasped, barely able to speak through his exhaustion, "I cannot carry this stone any longer. It is breaking my body and my spirit simultaneously. I feel as though I might collapse if I hold it for even one more moment. Please, may I set it down?" Master Yasuko looked at him with infinite compassion, her eyes reflecting deep understanding of both his physical pain and the spiritual lesson unfolding. "Then put it down," she said gently, her voice carrying the warmth of a mother comforting a suffering child. Ren let the stone fall to the earth with a heavy thud that seemed to echo through the quiet garden. Immediately, a wave of profound relief washed over his entire being. His shoulders dropped, his breathing deepened naturally, and he felt as though he could float after hours of carrying such crushing weight. The absence of that burden was itself a kind of joy, a liberation he had not expected to feel so intensely. Master Yasuko set down her gardening tools and faced her student directly, her expression reflecting both firmness and tenderness. "The suffering of the world is like that stone," she said softly. "It is real, and it is heavy. Your compassion is a beautiful and necessary quality. Never lose that sensitivity to others' pain. But you are not meant to carry the stone of all suffering upon your shoulders." She gestured toward the stone now resting peacefully on the earth. "You are meant to see suffering clearly, to understand its weight and reality, to feel it deeply enough to be motivated toward helpful action, and then to put it down so that your hands and heart are free to help where you actually can make a difference." The Buddha once said, "You will not be punished for your anger, you will be punished by your anger." This ancient wisdom illuminates a profound truth about compassion and service. When we carry the weight of all suffering within our hearts, we become too burdened to offer genuine help to anyone. Why do we so readily pick up stones of suffering that are not ours to carry? Buddhist psychology points to several patterns that create this overwhelm. First is empathic absorption, the tendency to take on others' pain until we become paralyzed by its magnitude. Second is the ego's subtle desire to be the one who fixes everything, a spiritual pride that believes we should be capable of healing all wounds. True compassion requires what Buddhism calls emotional non-attachment. This doesn't mean becoming cold or uncaring. but developing the capacity to feel deeply without being consumed, to respond skillfully without being overwhelmed. Like a doctor who can treat wounds without taking on the patient's pain, we learn to serve from clear seeing rather than emotional fusion. Consider your own relationship with others' suffering. How often do you scroll through news feeds, absorbing story after story of tragedy until you feel helpless and depleted? How frequently do you take on the emotional burdens of family members or friends, carrying their pain as if it were your own? Each time we do this, we pick up another stone, and the more stones we carry, the less capable we become of meaningful action. The practice of compassionate boundaries begins with recognizing the difference between response and reaction. When we react to suffering, we often absorb it, multiplying pain without creating solutions. When we respond, we maintain enough clarity and emotional balance to take helpful action, donating to causes we care about, volunteering our skills, or simply offering presence to someone in need. Buddha taught, thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. When we maintain our own inner light rather than dimming it by carrying others' stones, we become sources of illumination. Our peace becomes a gift to a troubled world, our clarity a beacon for those lost in confusion. This doesn't mean we become indifferent to suffering or stop caring about injustice. Rather, we learn to care in a way that actually helps. We can acknowledge the reality of pain without making it our permanent residence. We can feel moved by others' difficulties without moving into their difficulties. Tonight, as you become aware of the various stones, you may be carrying worries about global events you cannot control, emotional burdens that belong to others, the weight of trying to fix what is not yours to fix. Can you feel the relief that comes with setting them down? Can you distinguish between caring and carrying, between compassion and co-suffering? As Buddha taught, your work is to discover your work, and then with all your heart to give yourself to it. When we stop carrying stones that are not ours, we free ourselves to pick up the tools that are, serving the world from a place of strength rather than depletion. In feudal Japan, where honor was measured by the sharpness of one's sword and courage was proven on blood-soaked battlefields, there lived a battle-hardened warrior named Noboru. His armor bore the scars of countless conflicts, and his eyes carried the weight of a man who had witnessed too much violence and death. The constant exposure to brutality had left him with questions that gnawed at his spirit during the quiet hours between campaigns. Noboru had spent his life fighting for various lords, facing death countless times with the stoic acceptance that was expected of his class. Yet beneath his warrior's exterior, philosophical questions had begun to emerge with increasing urgency. The proximity of death in every battle had made him acutely aware of life's fragility and the mystery of what might await beyond the final breath. Having heard stories of a Zen master named Tetsu, whose wisdom was renowned throughout the land, Noboru decided to seek answers to the questions that military training had never addressed. He approached the master's simple dwelling with the same directness he brought to combat, his heavy armor clanking with each step across the peaceful temple grounds. "Master Tetsu," Noboru said, bowing stiffly in his restrictive armor while maintaining the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "I have spent my life fighting for my lord, facing death in countless battles without retreating. Tell me truthfully, is there really a paradise and a hell awaiting us after death? Do our actions in this life determine our fate in the next?" Master Tetsu looked up from his tea, studying the warrior with penetrating eyes that seemed to see through armor into the soul beneath. Rather than answering directly, he asked a question of his own, his voice carrying a tone of genuine curiosity. "Who are you to ask such a question?" the master inquired calmly, his gaze never leaving the warrior's face. "I am a samurai," Noboru replied with evident pride. straightening his shoulders and allowing his hand to rest naturally on the hilt of his sword. I serve my lord with honor and have never retreated from battle, no matter how dangerous the odds or how fierce the enemy. Master Tetsu's expression suddenly shifted, his face transforming from serene interest to something approaching disdain. His voice took on a mocking tone that cut through the peaceful temple atmosphere like a blade through silk. "You, a soldier?" he exclaimed with dismissive laughter that echoed off the temple walls. "What kind of ruler would have someone like you as his guard? Look at yourself. Your face shows the coarseness of a common mercenary, weathered and crude from years of violence. How could someone so obviously lowly claim to be a protector of nobility?" The words struck Noboru like physical blows, each insult landing with the force of a warhammer against his most cherished identity. His face flushed red with anger, and his hand instinctively moved toward the grip of his sword. The assault on his honor was unbearable, cutting deeper than any weapon ever had. "So, you carry a sword?" Master Tetsu continued, his voice dripping with contempt and mockery. "That weapon is probably much too dull to cut off my head. I doubt you could slice through a paper screen, let alone defend anyone of importance. What lord would trust his life to such an obviously incompetent warrior?" Unable to contain his rage any longer, Noboru began to draw his sword, the steel singing as it emerged from its scabbard with deadly intent. His entire body trembled with fury, his vision narrowing to focus solely on this insolent monk who dared to question everything he held sacred. His training took over, and he prepared to silence this insult to his honor with the swift justice of his blade. At that precise moment, as the sword caught the afternoon light and death hung in the air between them, Master Tetsu spoke with sudden clarity that pierced through the warrior's rage like an arrow finding its target. "Here," he said calmly, "open the gates of hell." The words penetrated Noboru's consciousness with the force of sudden enlightenment. In that instant, he saw himself clearly consumed by anger, ready to kill over wounded pride, his mind clouded by fury that had transformed a peaceful temple into a realm of violence and hatred. He understood that hell was not some distant destination awaiting judgment, but the very state he inhabited in that moment of blinding rage. The samurai's hand froze on his sword as recognition dawned across his features, like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Slowly, with great reverence and newfound understanding, Noboru sheathed his weapon and bowed deeply before the master. His anger had transformed into profound gratitude for the teaching he had just received. "Here," Master Tetsu said gently, his voice now filled with the compassion that had been present all along beneath his skillful provocation. "Open the gates of paradise." The Buddha's wisdom reminds us, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. This teaching reveals the startling geography of our inner world. Heaven and hell are not distant destinations, but present moment experiences we create through the quality of our consciousness. Why do we so easily find ourselves standing at hell's gates? Through our own reactions. Buddhism identifies what it calls the three poisons that cloud our minds: greed, hatred, and delusion. When Noboru's pride was wounded, hatred arose instantly, transforming a peaceful afternoon into a realm of suffering. His entire reality shifted from spiritual seeking to murderous rage in mere moments. The deeper teaching shows us that we carry within ourselves the capacity for both states. Paradise and hell are not places we travel to after death. They are experiences we inhabit while living. Each moment offers us the choice between the hell of reactivity and the paradise of awareness. Consider how often throughout your day similar transformations occur in your own experience. A critical email arrives, and suddenly your peaceful morning becomes a realm of anxiety and resentment. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and the spaciousness of your drive contracts into a tight knot of irritation. A thoughtless comment from a colleague, and your contentment dissolves into hurt feelings and defensive thoughts. In spiritual practice, we cultivate the capacity to recognize these moments of transition. Like Noboru, drawing his sword, we learn to catch ourselves at the very moment we're about to enter hell through our own reactions. This recognition itself becomes the key that opens paradise's gates. Master Tetsu's apparent insults were not cruelty, but compassion in disguise. By provoking Noboru's anger so skillfully, he showed the warrior exactly what he needed to see, that hell is a state of mind we enter through our own choices, not a punishment imposed by external forces. This teaching invites us to examine our own triggers and reactive patterns. What words or situations instantly transport you to your own version of hell? Perhaps it's feeling unappreciated at work, being misunderstood by family, or facing unexpected challenges to your plans. Each of these experiences offers the same choice Noboru faced. The practice here involves developing what Buddhism calls the space between stimulus and response, that crucial moment where choice lives. In that space, we can decide whether to react from old patterns of anger and defensiveness, or respond from the paradise of clear awareness. When we're caught in reactivity, we're rejecting the present moment in favor of our thoughts about how things should be different. But when we can remain present even with uncomfortable experiences, we discover that paradise is not a reward for good behavior, but our natural state when we're not creating hell through resistance. Tonight, as you notice irritation or frustration arising in response to some difficulty, can you remember Master Tetsu's lesson? Can you recognize the moment when you're about to enter hell through your reactions, and instead choose the paradise of conscious presence? As Buddha taught, what we think, we become. In each moment, we are either opening hell's gates through unconscious reactivity, or opening paradise's gates through mindful awareness. The choice is always ours, and the results are always immediate. True spiritual practice is not about avoiding difficult situations, but about learning to meet whatever arises with the kind of presence that transforms experience itself. When Noboru recognized his anger as hell and chose gratitude instead, he discovered that the very same temple could be either paradise or hell, depending entirely on the state of consciousness he brought to it. At a peaceful monastery overlooking a serene mountain lake, where the morning mist rose like incense from the still water, a young student named Jiro sat dejected on the temple steps as the sun began its descent toward the distant peaks. His shoulders sagged with the weight of disappointment, and his eyes reflected the heaviness that had settled in his heart over the past months of struggle and apparent failure. For nearly 2 years, Jiro had dedicated himself completely to his studies at the monastery, arriving with the highest hopes and the sincere intention to become a learned teacher who could guide others on the spiritual path. He had thrown himself into every aspect of monastic life, with enthusiasm that his teachers had initially found inspiring. Yet despite his earnest efforts and genuine commitment, he had struggled with even the most basic requirements of his training. His attempts to memorize the fundamental sutras had been met with constant frustration. While other students seemed to absorb the ancient texts effortlessly, Jiro found the words slipping from his memory like water through cupped hands. During meditation sessions, when others sat in peaceful stillness, he battled with a mind that refused to settle, constantly distracted by thoughts and physical discomfort. His philosophical understanding lagged behind that of his peers, and during Dharma discussions, he often felt lost in concepts that seemed to come naturally to others. The dream that had brought him to the monastery of becoming a respected teacher who could offer wisdom and guidance to seekers now seemed impossibly distant and naive. "The boat is coming to take me home tomorrow morning," Jiro said to his teacher, Master Keizo, who had quietly approached and settled beside him on the stone steps. "I have failed in my studies here. What can I possibly say to my family? They sent me with such hope and pride, believing I would return as a learned monk who could serve our village and bring honor to our name." Master Keizo gazed out at the lake, where a small wooden fishing boat was making its way slowly across the still water, its simple form silhouetted against the golden light of the setting sun. The elderly teacher's presence carried the calm authority of someone who had witnessed countless students struggle with similar feelings of inadequacy and disappointment. "Tell them that you did your best," he answered gently, his voice carrying the wisdom of many years spent guiding confused and discouraged students. "That is as much as anyone can do, and it is far more valuable than most people realize." "But I wanted to be a famous teacher," Jiro replied, his voice thick with disappointment and dashed dreams. "I envisioned myself leading meditation sessions, having students seek my guidance, making a real difference in the world through my wisdom and understanding. Instead, I couldn't even master the basic teachings." "You can still make that difference," Master Keizo said simply, his tone suggesting possibilities that Jiro had not yet considered. "How?" asked Jiro, looking at his teacher with genuine confusion and a flicker of hope. "I couldn't memorize the sutras properly. I fell asleep during long meditation sessions. I failed at everything that seemed to matter most for spiritual development." Master Keizo smiled with the gentle compassion that comes from understanding the deeper currents beneath surface appearances. He pointed toward the water where the fishing boat continued its journey across the lake, now clearly visible against the backdrop of the setting sun. "Live from your heart, and I will show you how. Do you see that boat making its way across the lake, with the sun setting behind it?" he asked, directing Jiro's attention to the simple scene unfolding before them. "Yes, Master," Jiro replied, following his teacher's gaze across the tranquil water. "Do you see its wake spreading across the lake? Notice how the boat appears to be the point of a golden triangle as the wake fans out from its path through the water." Jiro squinted, trying to perceive what his teacher was describing. "Sort of," he said hesitantly, beginning to make out the V-shaped pattern the boat's passage was creating on the water's surface. "That boat is you," Master Keizo continued patiently, his voice taking on the quality of someone revealing a profound truth. "As you leave the monastery tomorrow and continue through your life, the lake represents the world around you. The wake is the effect that you will have on everyone you encounter, simply by being yourself." He paused, allowing the metaphor to settle into Jiro's understanding before continuing. "Each ripple triggers another ripple, which triggers yet another. By constantly striving to live as wise and loving a life as you can manage, you will teach the path of compassion to everyone you meet, simply by being authentic and kind. A few of these people will be touched by your example and will pass on your good influence to others," the master explained, gesturing toward the expanding wake. "Thus, the ever-widening wake of beneficial action creates more beneficial action, each ripple generating new ripples of kindness and understanding." Master Keizo pointed to where the late sunlight caught each small wave, creating countless points of reflected light dancing across the water's surface. "Most important, notice how each ripple catches the sun and reflects its light back toward heaven. Your authentic living becomes a mirror that reflects the divine light present in every moment." Jiro watched in growing wonder as the simple fishing boat continued its journey, the wake indeed, forming an ever-widening triangle of light upon the water. Each small wave caught the golden sunlight and transformed it into sparkling reflections that seemed to dance between earth and sky. "Would you come home with me and explain all of this to my father?" asked Jiro, hope beginning to kindle in his voice as he started to understand the profound teaching his master was offering. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. The deeper teaching reveals that influence spreads not through grand gestures or perfect knowledge, but through the simple authenticity of a heart committed to kindness and truth. Why do we believe that only formal credentials or recognized achievements qualify us to make a meaningful impact? Our culture conditions us to equate worth with external validation, degrees, titles, measurable accomplishments. This conditioning becomes particularly painful in spiritual contexts, where we may feel that enlightenment itself is another achievement to be earned, rather than a natural expression of our authentic being. Consider how often throughout your day you encounter people who touch your life, not through their expertise, but through their simple human warmth. The grocery store clerk who greets you with genuine care, the neighbor who offers help without being asked, the friend who listens without judgment. These people create ripples that extend far beyond their awareness. Jiro's sense of failure came from measuring himself against external standards of spiritual achievement, rather than recognizing the value of his sincere effort and open heart. He had been trying to become someone important instead of appreciating the person he already was, someone capable of carrying kindness and authenticity into the world. The wake metaphor points to what Buddhism calls unconscious teaching, the natural transmission that occurs when we align our actions with our deepest values. Like the boat on the lake, we may not see our influence, but it spreads inevitably behind us, touching shores we never knew existed. This doesn't mean we should abandon learning or stop growing in wisdom and compassion. Rather, it means recognizing that our influence comes not from perfection, but from sincerity, not from having all the answers, but from living the questions with integrity. In practical terms, creating beneficial ripples means bringing conscious presence to ordinary interactions. The patience you show a difficult family member, the encouragement you offer a struggling colleague, the simple kindness you extend to strangers. Each of these moments becomes a teaching that propagates far beyond your awareness. The Buddha said, "Thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened." Happiness never decreases by being shared. Each moment of authentic living becomes such a candle, capable of igniting warmth and understanding in others without diminishing your own light. Tonight, as you reflect on your own journey and perhaps your own sense of falling short of ideal goals, can you see the golden wake you're already creating? Perhaps it's visible in the way family members have learned patience from your example, the comfort friends have found in your presence, or the simple kindness you've modeled for strangers. Master Keizo's teaching reveals that the most profound influence often comes not from those who seek recognition, but from those who simply commit to living with as much wisdom and love as they can manage in each moment. Your wake of influence spreads, whether you notice it or not, touching lives in ways you may never discover. The light you reflect back to heaven through your authentic being is not diminished by your imperfections or increased by your achievements. It shines simply because you choose to live with an open heart, creating ripples of possibility that extend far beyond what any formal teaching could accomplish. After a decade of intensive training under various masters, studying countless texts and dedicating himself wholly to Zen practice, a monk named Fumio finally achieved what he had long sought recognition as a qualified teacher. His understanding of Buddhist philosophy was profound, his meditation practice was deep and stable, and his ability to guide others had been tested and approved by respected authorities. Fumio received the formal acknowledgement that he was ready to teach the Dharma and help others along the path of awakening. His reputation for scholarly knowledge and disciplined practice had spread throughout the region, and he took considerable pride in having mastered the complex teachings that had challenged him for so many years. Eager to learn from one of the most renowned masters of his time, and perhaps to engage in sophisticated Dharma discussions that would further polish his understanding, Fumio decided to visit the famous Zen master Okawa. The older teacher's reputation for wisdom and insight was legendary throughout the mountain provinces, and Fumio looked forward to what he anticipated would be a meaningful exchange between accomplished practitioners. It was a rainy autumn day when Fumio made his pilgrimage to Master Okawa's temple. The roads were muddy and treacherous, requiring careful navigation around puddles that reflected the grey sky. The steady rainfall made it necessary for him to carry a bamboo umbrella to stay dry, and he wore his finest traveling sandals to protect his feet from the wet and slippery paths. When he reached the temple, Fumio carefully followed proper etiquette. He removed his muddy sandals and placed them on the covered porch along with his umbrella, just as custom and respect dictated. He arranged his outer robes to remove any trace of travel dust, composed himself with the dignity appropriate for meeting such an esteemed teacher, and entered the temple with the confidence of one qualified practitioner meeting another. Master Okawa received him graciously, offering the respectful bows due to a fellow teacher, while maintaining the natural authority that comes from deeper experience and realization. They settled together in the simple receiving room, and Fumio expected their conversation to focus on sophisticated points of doctrine, subtle aspects of meditation technique, or perhaps the challenges of guiding students through difficult passages in their spiritual development. Instead, after the initial pleasantries and formal exchanges, Master Okawa asked what seemed like an absurdly mundane question, completely unrelated to the profound topics Fumio had prepared to discuss. "I noticed you left your traveling sandals and umbrella on the porch when you entered," the master said with the same serious tone he might use to discuss the deepest mysteries of existence. "Tell me, did you place your umbrella to the left of your sandals or to the right?" Fumio was caught completely off guard by this seemingly trivial inquiry. Of all the important subjects they could explore together, the nature of Buddha mind, the subtleties of koan practice, the challenges of teaching in these changing times, why was this renowned master asking about such an insignificant detail? 5. He tried to recall the moment when he had arranged his belongings on the porch, but realized with growing dismay that he had no clear memory of the action. He had been so focused on the importance of this meeting, so preoccupied with the impressive conversation he expected to have, that he had performed the simple act of placing his things in complete unconsciousness. I don't know," Fumio admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, as the full implications of his ignorance became clear to him. Here he was, a certified teacher of mindfulness and awareness, and he couldn't even remember a simple action he had performed just minutes earlier. Master Okawa smiled with infinite compassion, his expression showing not mockery, but the gentle understanding of someone who had witnessed countless students discover similar gaps between their formal knowledge and lived practice. "Then you have not yet attained complete awareness," he said, with the patience of someone who had spent decades pointing students toward deeper understanding. Someone who is truly awake pays conscious attention to every moment, every action, every detail of experience. The master leaned forward slightly, his eyes reflecting both kindness and unwavering clarity. "The way you arrange your belongings reflects the same quality of attention you bring to meditation, to teaching, to all aspects of life. There is no separation between formal practice and informal activity in genuine awakening." In that instant, Fumio's pride in his accomplishments crumbled, replaced by a humbling recognition of how much deeper his practice needed to develop. He understood that true awareness isn't something you achieve once and then possess forever, like a certificate or degree. It's a quality of attention that must be cultivated and maintained in every single moment. Without hesitation, Fumio requested to become Master Okawa's student. For the next several years, he studied under the master's guidance, learning to bring the same quality of conscious attention to placing his sandals that he brought to formal meditation, treating the arrangement of an umbrella with the same reverence he showed to sacred texts. When he finally left Master Okawa's temple, Fumio had become a completely different kind of teacher, one who understood that enlightenment is not a destination but a way of traveling, not an achievement but a continuous practice of complete presence in whatever activity is at hand. As the Buddha observed, if you want to know your past, look at your present condition. If you want to know your future, look at your present actions. This teaching reveals that true spiritual development is measured not by our peak experiences, but by the quality of attention we bring to ordinary moments. Why do we assume that enlightenment exists only in special circumstances or elevated states of consciousness? Our minds create artificial divisions between spiritual activities and mundane tasks, imagining that awareness is something we turn on during meditation and turn off during routine actions. This separation prevents the integration that marks genuine spiritual maturity. Fumio's mistake reflects a common pattern among spiritual practitioners. He had developed the ability to be mindful during designated practice periods, but hadn't yet learned to extend that same quality of awareness to everyday activities. He could be present while sitting in meditation, but unconscious while performing simple tasks. Consider your own daily routine and the quality of presence you bring to different activities. How conscious are you while brushing your teeth, preparing meals, or getting dressed? Do you perform these activities with the same attention you might bring to more important tasks? The gap between formal practice and informal living often reveals where our awareness needs to deepen. Master Okawa's question wasn't really about umbrellas and sandals. It was about whether Fumio's spiritual development had penetrated to the cellular level of his existence. Could he maintain presence while performing unconscious habits as easily as during conscious spiritual practice? Zen Master Dogen taught, practice and enlightenment are one. This means that the quality of consciousness we cultivate in any moment is both the path and the destination. There's no separation between developing awareness and being aware every moment offers a complete opportunity for awakening. In Zen temples, students learn that washing dishes is as sacred as chanting sutras, that sweeping floors carries the same spiritual value as studying philosophy. This isn't because these activities are inherently special, but because the quality of consciousness we bring to any activity determines its transformative power. The Buddha said, "Mindfulness is the path to the deathless. Heedlessness is the path to death. True aliveness is found in complete presence, and complete presence can be cultivated in any activity, no matter how simple or routine. The most ordinary moments often offer the greatest opportunities for awakening. This integration requires developing what might be called seamless awareness, consciousness, that operates whether we're thinking about it or not. It's relatively easy to be mindful when we remember to be mindful. The deeper practice involves making consciousness our default state, rather than something we access only during special circumstances. Tonight, as you perform the simple actions that end your day, perhaps removing your own shoes, arranging items for tomorrow, or preparing for sleep, can you bring the same quality of attention you might give to formal meditation? Can you discover whether your spiritual practice has begun to transform the unconscious habits that make up so much of daily life? The Buddha's wisdom reminds us that every moment is a teacher, and every place is a classroom. The umbrella beside Fumio's sandals became his teacher that day, revealing exactly where his practice needed to deepen. Sometimes, the most profound lessons come disguised as the most ordinary questions, asked by masters wise enough to see that true awakening is found not in transcending the mundane, but in discovering the sacred hidden within it. Master Seiyun lived in a small village where his reputation for wisdom, compassion, and exemplary character had been carefully cultivated over many decades. The villagers regarded him as a living embodiment of spiritual purity, someone who had transcended ordinary human weaknesses and achieved a level of moral perfection that inspired their own efforts toward virtue. His teachings drew seekers from distant provinces, and his simple way of life served as a model for countless students. In this same village lived a young woman whose family was well known and respected throughout the community. When she found herself pregnant outside of marriage, her condition created a scandal that rippled through the tight-knit social fabric like a stone thrown into still water. Her parents were furious and demanded to know who was responsible for bringing such shame upon their honorable family name. At first, the young woman refused to reveal the father's identity, desperately trying to protect someone she loved, whose reputation and future would be destroyed if the truth became known. But as her parents' anger intensified and the social pressure became unbearable, she made a desperate decision, born of panic and confusion. In a moment of fear, she pointed to the one person she believed might be able to weather this storm better than her actual lover, the respected Master Seiyun. Surely, she reasoned in her desperation, a man of such established spiritual reputation could survive false accusations better than someone with everything to lose. When her outraged parents confronted the Zen master with their daughter's accusation, they expected protests of innocence, detailed explanations, or at least some expression of shock at being falsely accused of such behavior. Instead, Master Seiyun listened calmly to their angry words, his expression remaining peaceful and untroubled. "Is that so?" he replied simply, his voice carrying neither defensiveness nor admission, just a quality of acceptance that seemed to encompass whatever reality was being presented to him. His response only seemed to confirm their worst suspicions in their minds. Surely an innocent man would defend himself more vigorously, they reasoned. An honorable person would express outrage at such false accusations and demand the chance to clear his name. The scandal exploded throughout the village like wildfire. People who had revered Master Seiyun as a saint now whispered that he was a hypocrite who had been living a lie. His reputation was destroyed overnight, and former students abandoned him in disgust and disappointment. The man they had elevated as a spiritual ideal was now seen as a fraud who had betrayed their trust. When the child was born, several months later, the parents brought the infant directly to Master Seiyun's simple dwelling. They placed the baby in his arms with bitter ceremony, their faces showing the contempt they felt for his supposed deception. "This is your responsibility now," they declared with cold finality. "Since you are the father, you must take care of this child. We will have nothing more to do with this shame you have brought upon our family." Again, Master Seiyun simply responded, "Is that so?" and accepted the baby without protest, explanation, or any attempt to defend himself against the accusations he knew to be false. For many months, the former master cared for the child with tender attention and genuine love. He fed the infant with careful precision, changed diapers without complaint, walked the floors during sleepless nights, and provided all the nurturing care that any devoted parent would give. Neighbors who had once brought him offerings of food and respect now ignored him or spoke of him with contempt. He had lost his position in the community, his reputation, his livelihood, and the respect he had spent decades earning. Yet he continued to care for the child with peaceful dedication, never showing resentment or bitterness about his circumstances. Meanwhile, the young woman struggled with the weight of her deception, watching the revered teacher suffer for her lie while caring lovingly for a child that wasn't his became increasingly unbearable. The guilt consumed her thoughts and destroyed her peace, until she could no longer live with what she had done to an innocent man. Finally, she confessed the truth to her parents, revealing the real father's identity and admitting to the terrible injustice she had inflicted upon Master Seiyun. Her parents were horrified to learn the extent of the wrong they had committed against a genuinely innocent person. They rushed to Master Seiyun's dwelling with profuse apologies, their faces showing shame and remorse for the accusations they had believed and the treatment they had given him. "Master, we have wronged you terribly," they said, bowing deeply in genuine contrition. "Our daughter has confessed that you are not the father. We know now that you have suffered unjustly because of our mistake and our failure to seek the truth. Please forgive us and allow us to take the child back to its real family." Master Seiyun listened to their apologies with the same equanimity he had shown to their accusations. As he gently placed the baby in their arms, he offered the same response he had given throughout the entire ordeal, his voice carrying neither triumph nor resentment. "Is that so?" he said quietly, his inner peace apparently unchanged by either the false accusations or the vindication that followed. As the Buddha observed, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. Master Seiyun's story reveals the profound power of maintaining inner equilibrium, regardless of how others perceive us or what circumstances life presents. Why do we allow external events and other people's opinions to determine our internal state? Most of us have learned to derive our sense of worth and peace from how others treat us, making our happiness dependent on factors beyond our control. Master Seiyun demonstrated a different possibility, an unshakable center that remains stable whether we're being praised or blamed. His response, "Is that so?" represents more than passive acceptance. It embodies what Buddhism calls non-attachment to reputation, status, and even justice itself. This doesn't mean being indifferent to truth or fairness, but recognizing that our inner peace doesn't have to depend on external circumstances being ideal. Consider how you typically respond to criticism, misunderstanding, or unfair treatment. The natural human reaction is to defend ourselves vigorously, to fight against injustice, to demand that others recognize the truth about our character. But Master Seiyun's approach reveals another path, meeting all circumstances with the same peaceful acceptance. This teaching doesn't suggest we should never defend ourselves or that we should passively accept all injustices. Rather, it points to the possibility of maintaining our center regardless of how the world treats us. We can take appropriate action when necessary, while keeping our inner peace independent of external outcomes. The Buddha taught, "You will not be punished for your anger, you will be punished by your anger." Master Seiyun's equanimity protected him from the additional suffering that would have come from resentment, self-pity, or desperate attempts to restore his reputation. While the situation was undoubtedly challenging, he didn't compound the difficulty with emotional resistance. Look at your own reactions to being misunderstood or treated unfairly. How much of your suffering comes from the actual events, and how much comes from your mental and emotional responses to those events? Master Seiyun's example suggests we have far more control over the second source of suffering than the first. This practice requires developing what might be called inner sovereignty, the recognition that our essential worth and peace don't depend on external validation or fair treatment. This doesn't make us passive or prevent us from taking skillful action, but it frees us from the exhausting cycle of defending our image and seeking others' approval. The child in the story represents all the responsibilities and challenges that life presents to us, whether we feel they're rightfully ours or not. Master Seiyun's tender care for the infant shows that we can meet unexpected burdens with love rather than resentment, even when we didn't create the situation ourselves. In spiritual practice, we learn to hold outcomes lightly while engaging wholeheartedly with whatever circumstances arise. This allows us to respond from wisdom rather than reactivity, maintaining our integrity, regardless of how others perceive or treat us. Tonight, as you consider the various judgments, misunderstandings, or unfair treatments you may have experienced, Can you imagine responding with Master Seiyun's peaceful, "Is that so?" Can you find the space between what happens to you and how you respond, discovering that your inner peace need not be held hostage by external circumstances? The Buddha's wisdom teaches us that peace comes from within, not from external conditions being perfect. True spiritual maturity isn't measured by how well life treats us, but by how gracefully we can meet whatever life brings, maintaining our compassion and dignity, regardless of whether the world recognizes our true nature. When the truth was finally revealed and Master Seiyun was vindicated, his peaceful response showed that his equanimity hadn't depended on being proven right. His inner stability remained constant through both false accusation and public vindication, demonstrating the kind of freedom that comes from finding our center in something deeper than external circumstances. In a remote mountain region, where ancient execution grounds served as sobering reminders of mortality, Zen Master Jaisen had completed several days of intensive meditation retreat. He had chosen to sit beneath weathered wooden posts, using the proximity of death to penetrate more deeply into the nature of existence and the preciousness of each moment of life. After completing this profound contemplation on impermanence, Master Jaisen made his way to a nearby hillside, where he could rest and integrate the insights that had emerged during his solitary practice. He found a peaceful spot on an embankment overlooking a horse training area, where he lay down to continue his meditation under the open sky. As he rested there in profound silence, absorbed in the natural rhythm of breath and the vast awareness that encompasses all experience, a harsh disturbance shattered the tranquil atmosphere. From the training ground below came the violent sounds of a soldier brutally attempting to break his horse's resistance through force and intimidation. The animal's distressed whinnying mixed with the sharp crack of a whip and the angry shouts of a man who had clearly lost control of both his temper and his training methods. Each blow seemed to make the horse more agitated rather than more compliant, creating a vicious cycle where the soldier's frustration fed the animal's fear, which in turn triggered even harsher treatment. Master Jaisen observed this scene with growing concern, not only for the suffering animal, but for the man who was degrading himself through such unnecessary cruelty. The soldier was caught in a pattern that was destroying both his relationship with the horse and his own inner peace. Yet he seemed unable to recognize the futility of his approach. Unable to remain silent while witnessing such pointless violence, Master Jaisen called out from his position on the hillside, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone who had spent years cultivating inner harmony. "Friend, what do you think you are accomplishing down there?" he called, hoping to interrupt the cycle of violence before it escalated further. The soldier, completely absorbed in his rage and frustration, ignored the interruption and continued his harsh treatment of the increasingly panicked animal. The beating intensified, as if the man's anger had been fueled rather than calmed by the gentle inquiry. "Friend," Master Jaisen called out again, this time with more insistence, his voice carrying both compassion for the soldier's suffering and firmness about the need to end this destructive behavior. "What do you think you are doing to that poor creature?" Still, the warrior continued his futile attempts to force compliance through violence, lost in a cloud of frustration that prevented him from hearing either the horse's distress or the master's concerned intervention. The animal became increasingly frantic, which only seemed to confirm in the soldier's mind that even harsher measures were necessary. This time, something in Master Jaisen's tone penetrated the warrior's rage. The quality of presence and authority in the voice from the hillside was impossible to ignore. The man stopped his beating, climbed down from his horse, and approached the embankment to confront whoever had dared to interrupt his training session. As he drew closer and could see the monk more clearly, his expression began to change. There was something about this stranger that commanded respect, a quality of peaceful strength that spoke of deep inner development and wisdom earned through years of disciplined practice. "You were calling out to me," the soldier said, his voice still carrying traces of anger, but now mixed with curiosity about this unusual intervention. "Do you have something important to tell me about my horse training?" Master Jisun looked at the man with profound compassion, seeing not an enemy to be criticized, but a fellow human being caught in the same cycles of frustration and ineffective force that traps so many of us when we try to control what resists our will. His response was simple yet profound, cutting directly to the heart of the problem with the clarity that comes from understanding the root causes of suffering rather than just addressing surface symptoms. "Rather than beating your horse for being unruly and resistant," Master Jisun said gently, "why not train your own mind instead? The horse is responding to your inner state of agitation and force. When you approach with calm authority rather than frustrated violence, you may discover that cooperation emerges naturally." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge connecting two entirely different approaches to dealing with difficulty, one based on external force and control, the other grounded in internal cultivation and wisdom. As the Buddha observed, conquer anger with non-anger, conquer badness with goodness, conquer meanness with generosity, conquer dishonesty with truth. This teaching captures the essence of Master Jisun's guidance, the recognition that our external struggles mirror our internal state. Why do we instinctively try to solve problems through force and control, rather than by addressing the internal conditions that create conflict? The untrained mind seeks comfort by attempting to manage its environment, rather than developing the flexibility to respond skillfully to whatever arises. This creates what Buddhism calls pushing the river, exhausting ourselves, trying to force reality to match our preferences. The soldier's approach represents how we often handle difficult circumstances in our own lives. When technology fails during important work, we become frustrated with the machine rather than examining our attachment to having everything function perfectly. When traffic delays make us late, we experience road rage instead of accepting the unpredictable nature of travel. In each case, we're like the warrior beating his horse, applying force to external circumstances while ignoring the internal conditions that create our suffering. The horse represents all the uncontrollable aspects of life: other people's behavior, natural events, technological failures, and the inherent unpredictability of existence. Consider your own patterns of trying to control external circumstances when you feel frustrated or powerless. How often do you find yourself getting angry at situations rather than working with your own reactions to those situations? The computer that crashes, the person who doesn't respond to your advice, the weather that disrupts your plans. Each offers an opportunity to practice internal training rather than external force. Master Jisun's suggestion points to the fundamental Buddhist teaching about working with our own minds rather than trying to force compliance from the world around us. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting harmful situations, but approaching challenges from a place of inner stability rather than reactive frustration. The training he recommends involves developing what Buddhism calls emotional regulation, the capacity to remain centered when circumstances don't match our expectations. This includes mindfulness practices that help us observe our reactive patterns without being swept away by them, and compassion practices that help us respond to difficulties with patience rather than aggression. In practical terms, training the mind means learning to pause between stimulus and response, creating space where choice lives. When the horse of difficult circumstances appears unruly, we can ask ourselves, what would it mean to approach this situation from calm authority rather than frustrated force? The Buddha taught, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. The path to harmony lies not in conquering external conditions, but in cultivating the inner qualities that remain stable, regardless of what the world presents. When we approach situations from genuine peace rather than hidden agitation, we often discover that cooperation emerges more naturally than when we try to force compliance. Animals are particularly sensitive to human emotional states, which is why the soldier's frustrated energy created more resistance in his horse. Similarly, other people often respond to our underlying attitude more than our words or actions. When we approach conflicts from internal calm rather than barely controlled frustration, we create space for more creative solutions to emerge. Tonight, as you encounter whatever challenges or frustrations arise, can you remember Master Jason's wisdom? When you find yourself wanting to force external circumstances to change, can you pause and ask what it would mean to train your own mind instead? 5. The Buddha's teaching reminds us that hatred is never appeased. By hatred, only by non-hatred can hatred be appeased. This eternal law applies to all our attempts to solve problems through force rather than wisdom. The horse that resists beating may respond beautifully to patient, skillful guidance. The circumstances that frustrate us may transform when we approach them from a different internal state. High in the mountain villages where terraced fields carved graceful patterns into steep hillsides, there lived a skilled craftsman named Kenji, who had discovered the secret of happiness without realizing it. Each dawn, he would climb winding paths to his workshop, his tools balanced carefully across his shoulders. As he worked with wood and stone, shaping useful objects with practiced hands, he would sing old mountain songs that echoed across the valleys. Though he lived simply by society's measures, dwelling in a modest cottage with few possessions, Kenji's heart had known contentment for many years. The rhythm of his work felt natural and satisfying. The beauty of the mountains filled his spirit with daily wonder, and the honest labor of his craft brought a deep sense of purpose. His simple life felt complete, and he desired nothing more than what he already possessed. One day, he was commissioned to create decorative panels for the grand mansion of a wealthy merchant. As he approached the estate to deliver his work, his eyes widened at the magnificence that surrounded him. Marble columns reached toward the sky like prayers made solid, gardens sprawled in perfect symmetry, and servants moved efficiently through spaces designed for luxury and comfort. For the first time in his adult life, Kenji felt the sharp pang of desire pierce his natural contentment, like a thorn finding tender skin. If only I were wealthy like this merchant, he sighed deeply, his voice carrying the weight of sudden dissatisfaction. Then I would not have to earn my living through the sweat of manual labor as I do now. To his amazement, a voice seemed to whisper from the very stones of the mansion itself, speaking words that resonated through his consciousness with mysterious authority. Your wish has been granted. From this moment forward, anything you truly desire will be given to you. Kenji returned home that evening to find his humble cottage transformed into a mansion rivaling the merchant's estate. Overwhelmed with joy and wonder at this miraculous change, he abandoned his tools and began enjoying the luxurious life of the wealthy, convinced that he had finally discovered true happiness. But one scorching afternoon, as he gazed from his ornate window at the busy street below, he observed the king's royal procession passing by his home. The monarch sat in cool shade within his golden palanquin, surrounded by nobles and servants who attended to his every need. Even in the oppressive heat, the king appeared serene and comfortable, elevated above the common discomforts that afflicted ordinary people. How I wish I were a king myself, Kenji thought with growing intensity, and immediately found himself reclining on silk cushions within the royal carriage, wearing robes of state and holding the symbols of ultimate earthly power. But even the royal palanquin proved warmer than expected under the relentless summer sun. Despite thick curtains and elaborate fans, the heat penetrated relentlessly, making even royal comfort feel inadequate against nature's power. "I wish I were the sun itself," Kenji declared with determination, and instantly found himself radiating waves of light and heat across the entire universe, feeling magnificent and all-powerful as he illuminated the world below. As the sun, he felt truly supreme until massive storm clouds gathered beneath him, completely blocking his rays and preventing his light from reaching the earth. These simple formations of water vapor proved more powerful than his cosmic radiance. "I wish to be a cloud," he announced, and immediately became a vast storm system, glorying in his power to eclipse even the mighty sun and control the distribution of light and shadow across the landscape. But as he transformed into falling rain, he encountered an enormous mountain that blocked his path completely, standing immovable against even his mightiest storms. No amount of wind or precipitation could budge this ancient stone formation. "A mere mountain is more powerful than I," he realized with frustrated amazement. "I want to be a mountain myself." Suddenly he stood tall upon the earth as a massive peak, feeling he had achieved true permanence and unshakable strength. Nothing could move him or diminish his towering presence above the surrounding landscape. But soon he heard rhythmic chipping sounds at his base that filled him with concern. Looking down, he saw a tiny human figure methodically cutting chunks of stone away from his foundation, gradually reducing his mighty form one small piece at a time. "A tiny human is more powerful than even a mountain," he marveled with growing understanding. "I want to be human again." And so Kenji found himself once more climbing familiar mountain paths toward his workshop, his tools balanced across his shoulders, just as they had been for years. But now, something profound had changed within his heart. As he shaped wood and stone and felt mountain breezes on his face, his spirit swelled with deep gratitude and recognition. His song returned, richer and more joyful than before, because he had learned through experience to be genuinely content with exactly who and what he was. The great journey through all forms of power and status had brought him full circle to the simple truth that happiness had been available all along in his authentic life. The Buddha once said, "Health is the greatest gift, and contentment the greatest wealth." This ancient wisdom illuminates the endless cycle of wanting that keeps us from recognizing the abundance already present in our lives. Why do we chase after different conditions, always believing happiness lies in the next transformation? Each desire fulfilled reveals yet another desire, creating an endless cycle of dissatisfaction. We imagine that if we just had more money, a better position, different circumstances, then we would finally be content. But Kenji's journey reveals the futility of seeking happiness through external change. Consider your own versions of this cycle. Perhaps you've thought, "I'll be happy when I get promoted," only to discover new sources of stress in the higher position. Or, "I'll be content with more money," only to find that greater wealth brings different worries. Each achievement tends to reveal the next mountain to climb, rather than providing lasting satisfaction. The deeper teaching here shows that the problem isn't with our circumstances, but with our relationship to them. Kenji's dissatisfaction didn't arise from any actual deficiency in his life as a craftsman. He had been genuinely happy until comparison introduced the poison of "if only." His contentment was destroyed, not by poverty, but by the belief that he needed something different to be fulfilled. Zen master Suzuki Roshi taught, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This paradox points to the heart of genuine contentment, the ability to fully accept what is, while still engaging wholeheartedly with life's natural changes and opportunities for growth. The transformation in Kenji's final experience wasn't into something greater than what he had been, but into appreciation for what he had always possessed. His work remained the same, his tools unchanged, his cottage as modest as ever, but his relationship to his life was completely transformed by understanding rather than acquisition. This doesn't mean we should never seek improvement, or that all desires are spiritually problematic. Rather, it points to the importance of distinguishing between desires that arise from genuine inspiration and those that emerge from dissatisfaction with our present circumstances. Healthy desire moves us forward while keeping us grounded in gratitude. Unhealthy desire promises that happiness exists somewhere other than where we are. In practical terms, cultivating contentment means regularly acknowledging what is already working well in your life before focusing on what you'd like to change. It means recognizing the difference between wanting something because it would genuinely serve your growth and wanting it because you believe it will finally make you happy. The Buddha taught, contentment is natural wealth. Luxury is artificial poverty. When we can find genuine appreciation for our present circumstances, not passive resignation, but active gratitude, we discover a kind of wealth that doesn't depend on external conditions and can't be taken away by changing circumstances. Tonight, as you notice your mind's habitual reaching toward what's not here, can you experiment with Kenji's final wisdom? Can you find the song that emerges when you stop trying to be anything other than what you are? What would it feel like to approach tomorrow from contentment rather than from a sense of something missing? This practice doesn't make us passive or prevent us from working toward meaningful goals. Instead, it provides a foundation of fulfillment that allows us to engage with life's opportunities from abundance rather than scarcity, from gratitude rather than grasping. As the craftsman discovered after his great journey through all forms of power and status, the greatest transformation available isn't becoming something different, but recognizing the inherent completeness of what we already are. When Kenji returned to his mountain path, he carried the same tools and walked the same route, but his heart sang with the recognition that he had never actually needed to leave home to find what he was seeking. You're right, let's adjust to reach exactly 24, 0 words. Since you're at 21, 0, we need 3, 0 more words. Let me write a slightly shorter version of story 14 and then create a comprehensive conclusion to finish at our target. Here's story 14, The Fish's Question, with word count and pauses. Story 14, The Fish's Question. In the vast depths of the Pacific Ocean, where sunlight filtered down through layers of blue and green water, and coral gardens swayed in gentle currents like underwater forests, a young fish named Mizu swam restlessly through waters that had been her home since birth. Despite being surrounded by the wonder of ocean life, schools of silver fish moving like liquid metal, sea anemones dancing in the current, and the rhythmic pulse of waves far above, she felt troubled by a persistent question that consumed her thoughts. One day, approaching an ancient sea turtle whose shell bore the scars and wisdom of countless journeys across the ocean's expanse, Mizu asked with earnest confusion, "Elder, I keep hearing other sea creatures speak reverently about something they call the Great Water. They talk about it as if it's the most important thing in all existence, the source of all life and wisdom." She paused, her small fins moving with agitation. "But I've searched everywhere throughout these depths, and I cannot find this mysterious great water anywhere. I've explored coral reefs and deep trenches, followed currents to distant places, yet this great water remains hidden from me. What exactly is this thing everyone speaks of with such reverence?" The old turtle's eyes, deep and patient like tidal pools reflecting infinite sky, regarded the young fish with gentle amusement. His ancient voice, worn smooth by decades of storms and calms, carried the wisdom of one who had seen countless young creatures struggle with this same profound confusion. "Little one," the turtle replied with infinite patience, The great water is this very element that surrounds you completely at every moment. You have never been separate from it, not for a single instant of your existence. Mizu looked around frantically, darting left and right, swimming toward the surface and down toward the sandy bottom. But I don't see anything surrounding me, except ordinary water and sea life. Where is this great water you speak of? Why can't I perceive it if it's supposed to be everywhere? The turtle settled more comfortably among the soft kelp fronds, understanding that this teaching required patience and gentle persistence. Of course, you cannot see it as separate from yourself, he explained with the calm authority of deep experience. The great water flows through your gills with every breath. You were born in it. You move through it. You are nourished by it. And one day, you will dissolve back into it. You mean this water I swim through every day is the great water? Mizu asked, beginning to sense something vast and fundamental that had been present all along but remained unnamed. Yes, the turtle confirmed gently. You have never been separate from what you seek. The great water is both inside and outside of you simultaneously. It is so much a part of your essential nature that it has become invisible to you, like breath to a land creature, or light to one who has never known darkness. Lao Tzu taught, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. This ancient wisdom illuminates our relationship with the fundamental mystery of existence. We live immersed in the sacred, but fail to recognize it because it is too intimate, too constant, too essentially ourselves to register as something separate. Like Mizu searching for the great water while swimming in the ocean, we often seek the sacred, the meaningful, the source of peace and understanding, as if it exists somewhere other than our immediate experience. We imagine that spiritual truth must be rare, hidden, or accessible only through special practices, missing the profound ordinariness of consciousness itself. Consider how this pattern manifests in your own spiritual seeking. How often do you look for peace, as if it's something you need to acquire, rather than recognizing the awareness that is already peacefully witnessing your search? How frequently do you seek meaning in special experiences while overlooking the mystery of the most basic fact that you are aware at all? The great water represents what various traditions call by different names: Tao, Brahman, Buddha nature, the ground of being, or simply this. It is the fundamental aliveness that animates all existence, the consciousness in which all experiences appear, the essence that remains constant through all changing circumstances. We cannot see it as an object because we are expressions of it, rather than separate observers of it. Every attempt to grasp it conceptually is like Mizu trying to get outside the ocean to examine it objectively impossible, because the seeker and the sought are not separate. In practical terms, recognizing the great water means shifting attention from what you're experiencing to the awareness that knows you're experiencing. Right now, as you encounter these words, can you notice the consciousness that recognizes meaning? This knowing presence is not created by your thoughts or dependent on your circumstances. It is what remains constant, whether your mind is busy or quiet, whether your emotions are pleasant or difficult. The Buddha pointed to this recognition when he said, "Look within, thou art the Buddha." Not that you need to become enlightened, but that the very awareness reading these words is already the enlightenment you seek. The search ends not in finding something new, but in recognizing what has been present all along. Tonight, as you rest in the simple fact of being aware, can you sense this great water of consciousness that has never been absent? Can you feel how it needs no maintenance from you, no special state to access, no technique to reveal? It is more intimate than breath, more immediate than heartbeat, closer to you than your own thoughts. This recognition doesn't end practical spiritual practice, but transforms it. Instead of seeking awareness, we learn to rest as awareness. Instead of trying to attain peace, we discover the peace that naturally exists when we stop disturbing it with our seeking. Instead of searching for meaning, we recognize the consciousness that gives meaning to all search. As our journey through these ancient teachings draws to a gentle close, take a moment to notice what has shifted within you during this time together. Can you feel how a natural stillness has emerged, not through effort or acquisition, but through the simple act of allowing these timeless stories to work their quiet magic upon the landscape of your awareness? This tranquility you may be experiencing is not something foreign that has been added to your consciousness tonight. Rather, it is your own inherent nature that has been allowed to surface, like clear water, revealing itself when the mud of daily agitation settles to the bottom of a pond. The peace you feel is the same peace that has always been available, waiting just beneath the surface of your thoughts and concerns. Each story we explored together was designed to dissolve a particular barrier between you and this natural state of ease. Kosan's broken bucket taught us to release our grasping for spiritual experiences. Master Ryogen's teaching about appearance and essence showed us the importance of seeing beyond surface judgments. Daiki's lesson about the invisible foundation revealed how our worth doesn't depend on external recognition. We learned from Kawa's trust in the current how security comes through flowing rather than clinging. Master Enju's simple miracle reminded us that the sacred is hidden in the ordinary moments we so often overlook. Governor Watanabe's transformation showed us the freedom that comes when we drop our social masks and meet each other authentically. Through Ren's bucket of sorrows, we discovered healthy boundaries between compassion and co-suffering. Noboru's encounter with the gates of heaven and hell revealed how our reactions create our experience of paradise or torment. Jiro's broken pail taught us that influence spreads through authentic being rather than impressive credentials. Fumio's lesson about the sandals showed us that true awareness penetrates every ordinary moment, not just formal practice periods. Master Seiyun's unchanging heart demonstrated the possibility of maintaining inner peace regardless of external circumstances. Master Jisen's teaching about the restless horse pointed us toward working with our own minds rather than trying to force external compliance. Kenji's journey through all forms of desire brought him back to contentment with what he already was. And finally, little Mizu's search for the great water revealed that we are always swimming in the very consciousness we seek. These teachings have been planted within you like seeds that will continue to grow long after the immediate memory of tonight's stories has faded. This understanding is not dependent on your ability to remember every detail or analyze every lesson. It works through a deeper intelligence than the thinking mind, transforming your relationship to experience from the inside out. The Buddha offered gentle guidance when he said, "In the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you." Tonight has been an extended practice in letting go, releasing the effort to be anywhere other than here, the need to achieve any particular state of mind, the compulsion to solve problems through mental activity rather than allowing solutions to emerge from stillness. As you prepare to transition into sleep, know that the true teaching was not contained in the stories themselves, but in the quiet space they opened within your awareness. It is in this inner stillness that genuine healing occurs, where the body's natural wisdom can restore and repair, where the mind can release the accumulated tensions of conscious effort. Feel free to let any attempt to hold on to tonight's insights dissolve into the approaching rest. Trust that what needs to be retained will remain, and what needs to be released will fall away naturally. Your consciousness knows how to integrate these teachings without any help from your thinking mind. Carry this quality of gentle release with you as you drift towards sleep. Let it be the foundation for deep restoration and the quiet strength that will greet you when morning comes. The peace you have touched tonight is not a temporary visitor, but a permanent resident of your own awareness, available whenever you remember to stop struggling and simply allow what is already here to reveal itself. Remember that you are both the seeker and the sought, the question and the answer, the one who searches for home and the home itself. In recognizing this, the spiritual journey doesn't end, but is revealed to have been complete from the very beginning. You need only rest now, in the knowing that has always been yours. Sleep well, dear friend. May your dreams be gentle, your rest profound, and your awakening tomorrow filled with the same natural ease you have discovered here in this eternal now. The ancient masters whose wisdom we shared tonight offer this final blessing. May you always remember that the light you seek is the light by which you seek, and the peace you long for is the peace in which longing itself arises and gently dissolves. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the timeless teachings of awakened hearts. Until we meet again in the space where all stories end and the wordless truth begins, rest in the embrace of your own natural awareness, complete and perfect, exactly as you are.